I'm struck by a number of things, Joe, that are just super interesting about this story. I mean, it took you quite a while to get to the sort of scale you're at now, which is quite big. I mean, I think I don't want to kind of pass over that. I mean, 420 families, that's a lot. That's a lot that's going on there. And that's just the housing portion of what you do. As you said, you have all these other things. But what's interesting, well, one of the things that's interesting about that, though, is the way in which you did it. It took quite a long time, right? I mean, in an intentional method and an intentional growth, and you actually started on a much more modest scale. I mean, maybe could you talk a little bit about kind of that journey and we encounter a lot of churches that they see this idea of doing affordable housing or whatever, and they just sort of like want to jump from nothing to like, a 10-story building. And there's this whole thing in between that you have begun to uncover as sort of, I mean, moving into there's so many layers to that, but what sort of your reflections on that?
It does take me a long time to maybe get to where we are in 2024 for a couple of reasons, like you said. I mean, number one, we're not really that impressed by the size and scale of our work at this point. Because it really is more about how others in the broader community and other communities are trying to serve in their communities. And I think what we've discerned over the years, working with a lot of younger groups, as you kind of mentioned, or churches that want to do likewise, sometimes the number of buildings or the size of buildings that we're kind of working with now become a bit of a distraction, and it becomes overwhelming for churches that are just sort of like, what's the right next step for us? And so, a big 4-story building with 50 apartment units is probably not the right next step. And kind of showing that and touting that is maybe just kind of not that helpful. So, I mean, as you're saying, I think for us, just some of those initial steps were sort of like hanging drywall and drinking beer and watching each other's kids, in living rooms, and working on each other's houses and deciding who's going to bring what for dinner that evening, etc. And there's a community meeting, who can go and represent us and maybe make a contribution, etc. Those are really just kind of humble and daily ways of being community. And I think that's what it is for most folks. And that's really what it should be. And I think that does provide the practice and the DNA for kind of doing more, over time.